All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we generally look at different theories of everything that you probably never heard of that are very useful to know and that could help you put together all the pieces that have been strewn inside your head, all the different clues that you've had over the course of your life that don't quite fit together. Sometimes these theories of everything help you put them together in a coherent pattern and help you have a worldview that is coherent as well. So today is video number 276 that we have done on Dewey B. Larson's reciprocal system of theory. And very simply, the reciprocal system of theory states that we don't live in a universe of matter, and we don't live in a universe of energy, but we live in a universe of motion. And for Larson, other people have come up with that before, but Larson made his unique and original by defining motion as the relationship between space and time. So now if we want to do a quick test on that, just think of the most basic motion that we can think of, speed. The bicycle is moving 20 miles per hour. That's 20 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Speed is actually a relationship between space and time. And you can also see the reciprocal relationship in speed, where you say the bike is moving 20 miles per hour. Well, if you want to double the speed, you could say the bike is now moving 40 miles per hour. Or you could say that the bike is now moving 20 miles per half hour. You can either multiply the space or you can divide the time. That is a reciprocal relationship. Now, expanding to other kinds of motion, you bring in Larson's first fundamental postulate. He came up with two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. And the first one is the universe is made out of motion. Motion, it's really, I'm not quoting it, but paraphrasing. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time both have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they both come in 3 dimensions. I would say 3 or 4, but Larson said 3 dimensions, X, Y, Z coordinates. And that's something that we're commonly accustomed to with space. We commonly envision space as being 3-dimensional. But time, we normally think of as just 1-dimensional. But for Larson, time has also a coordinate aspect. There's an aspect to time that is 3-dimensional. And then there's another caveat to the first postulate that says that space and time both have their clock aspects. And the clock is a scalar motion, which Larson uses that term scalar motion as a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no particular direction. And you can think of that in terms of a clock. The clock is always getting later and later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And you can also envision this using a balloon with dots on it. If you blow up the balloon, all of the dots are moving away from each other. That is what Larson would call something more like clock space, as opposed to clock time. Clock space is everything is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And that was actually observed by the Hubble telescope back in the 1920s, that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. That is the flow of space, or the progression of space, the uh, clock space. And then the third caveat is that space and time both are quantized, meaning that they come only in chunks. There's no continuity of either space or time. There's a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. And you have, either one unit or you don't have any. And then you have either 2 units or you still have 1. Or you have 3 units or you still have 2. And those units are very, very, very small, microscopic in size for space, and instantaneous or almost instantaneous for time. But they do exist. And if you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. Larson calls that unit speed. 1/1 equals 1. And this unit speed, or the speed of light for Larson, is the boundary between 2 different sectors of our universe. Much unlike Einstein, who says that the speed of light was the maximum speed of the universe. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light, confining all of the universe into basically 1/2 of what Larson is positing. And so for Larson, there's an entire half of the universe that is moving faster than the speed of light. And really, the speed of light is like the midpoint, the null point, the neutral point of the universe. And then Larson calls that faster than light sector the cosmic sector. And then he refers to the slower than light sector that we're familiar with as the material sector. And in the material sector, you have coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, and you have clock time. The clock's always getting later and later and later. But in the cosmic sector, you have coordinate time, 3 dimensions of time, and clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And you have a perfect identity between the two. Whatever's going on in the material sector on a grand scale, the exact same thing is going on in the cosmic sector, except that you invert the roles of space and time. So even though we only know anything about the material sector, we can, in a certain sense, extrapolate to the cosmic sector merely by inverting the roles of space and time. Okay, then Larson also has a second postulate, which has been disputed by some of his followers, but and it's of little importance compared to the first postulate, but it is that the universe conforms to the relationships of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. One person that took Larson to task about the Euclidean geometry was Dr. Bruce Perret, who claimed that the universe, the geometry of the universe is projective geometry. And projective geometry has Euclidean geometry as a subset. There's really a geometrical cascade that goes on from projective geometry to affine geometry to metric geometry, then to Euclidean geometry. So Euclidean geometry is just a small subset of projective geometry. That's not. It's just more or less a finer point at this stage, but has some importance in other applications. But we are actually looking at a paper today that was written by Dr. Bruce Perret uh, before he died back in 2020. Larson died back in 1990. And this paper was written under the name Daniel Phoenix 3, which was the name that Dr. Perret used when he was writing somewhat speculatively about the reciprocal system. Now, Perret uses the reciprocal system as the basis for his departures, but he also has a number of other items in his toolbox that he pulls out when necessary, including the projective geometry, but also mythology, and he uses a lot of Taoism, Chinese Taoist philosophy, and uses a lot of science fiction. And then the Phoenix 3 part is that he claims that or at least he sets up his personality as one who was a computer programmer for Phoenix 3, which was a secret government project, time travel project that you may know as the Montauk Project, that also included the Philadelphia experiment from 1983 that set up a loop with 1943 and went famously awry. And you may have seen some books or interviews from people like Al Bielek and Duncan Cameron and Preston Nichols and others who were also there at the Montauk Project out on Long Island. Okay, now today is the 5th episode of this particular paper. So if you want to start the paper at the beginning, go back about 4 episodes. But we are about to start a section that is called The Realm of Coordinate Time. Back at Montauk, one of the early projects was to amplify a psychic's powers to control emotions and reactions of people at a distance. This was an accidental discovery, as the effect on the local people occurred in the opposite direction. The SAGE radar dish was pointed in. That's capitalized SAGE. I don't think he's covered that already, but moving on. The bulk of the radio energy was being reflected forward toward the test subject on a ship at sea. And what did not get reflected and often ended up in town had some peculiar properties to it. Both animals and people would pick up the emotions of the person in the chair and react to them as though there was someone there causing them. The only problem was that it was a non-linear response. Everything that went on in the chair room was recorded. The psychic couldn't burp without getting the attention of security, and they always had to tell what was on their mind and describe any strong emotions, as those variables would affect the experiments, and we had no way of compensating for that. Through correlating that information with the behavior of people and animals nearby, they found that the emotional content was temporally displaced, shifted into the past or the future, depending if the psychic was thinking of the past, such as, shoot, I forgot to return that library book, or in the future, such as, wonder what I'll have for dinner tonight. But the scale was larger. A thought a few hours ahead, like dinner, could translate to a week or more until the effect was manifest. Back then, they did not have a concept of coordinate time, but did have access to a secret science that they had apparently obtained from the Germans after World War II. which was based on some of the ether theories of the 19th century. I recall James Clerk Maxwell being mentioned on occasion, as well as Einstein's unified field, which he apparently did try to publish in the 1920s, but was pulled for one reason or another. But they did know that the speed of light wasn't a limit, as it is said to be these days, but a boundary that was the doorway to this etheric realm which somehow altered time. It wasn't until after the project was shut down that Dewey Larson had published sufficiently on the nature of his cosmic sector, the realm of three-dimensional time, that brought a lot of the pieces together. Looking back at all the anomalies with that cosmic sector knowledge, things make a lot more sense. When they were running the experiments with the chair back at the base, strange things would always happen. It got so frequent that people just tended to ignore them. Things like sitting in the mess hall, having lunch, and having a whole wall just shimmer and fade out of existence for a few minutes, then solidify back to what it was. When stuff like that happened, people would just pick up their trays and move to the other side of the room and continue eating. Ghosts, people that you see but aren't there, and poltergeist-like activity were very common. Things would fly up into the air without warning, shoot across the room. Made for an interesting job. They even had a team of paranormal experts from some psychic institute studying what was going on and questioning folks. Every now and then we'd have to attend a presentation from them, probably to keep people from panicking and going public. It wasn't all good stuff, though. I believe a lot of it was documented in the Philadelphia Project material. Now and then, rather than taking out a wall, it would catch a person or two, and they would go fast, or get stuck in the green, or go blank. Perhaps I should clarify some of those terms. When time begins to infringe upon space, the first thing you sense is going fast. It is a feeling that time is racing through you, though everything appears to be running at a normal pace about you. When you feel that, run. You're about to get stuck in the green. I think it is nature's way of warning you to get out of the way. What happens next is the air turns green, pea soup green. If you've ever been in a storm shelter when a tornado goes overhead, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The air turns green and starts to take on a thickness to it, eventually like trying to move through jello. You can get out of the way when it first starts. If not, then you are stuck in the green. Time is perceived in space as a solid, the inverse of the spatial vacuum, or an ether that has a thick soup feeling to it, like trying to run in a swimming pool. The green then fades out, and the objects in the field start to shimmer like the heat waves in a desert due to things in the distance. The air doesn't shimmer, the objects do. It is as though waves are running through them. Only lasts a few seconds, then goes blank. It becomes somewhat invisible, though it is still physically there, like a wall turning into a clear liquid. This is what they were originally trying to accomplish: optical invisibility on the DE-173 USS Eldridge Rainbow Project. When a person goes blank, you have to act fast and mark out their location and lay hands upon them, as are not easy to see. Usually, anyone new to the base would be commanded to do this, as it was found that exposure to these field effects was cumulative, and if you tried to save someone once too often, you would go blank as soon as you touched them. And you would have to touch skin to skin if you could find their skin. When someone went blank in the winter, all bundled up with clothes, about the only exposed skin area was a person's nose. Not easy to find. Though they were still there, it was in a distorted form. So you'd have to feel around and wait to see if anything happened. When you did make contact, skin to skin, they would start to transition back, and you would normally call over others to help, and the person would come back to normal. Curiously, when inanimate objects would go blank, they would just come back after the field was turned off, as in the USS Eldridge. Only biological organisms needed an assist. If a person goes blank and no one is there to help, good chance they will get stuck. Getting stuck means a person is fully conscious and totally paralyzed. You can't even blink your eyelids. It is as though clock time for the body has come to a halt, and not even the corpuscles in your blood can move through the bloodstream. People who have been stuck go into panic very quickly for good reason. Those that have been stuck refer to it as hell incorporated. It causes some substantial psychological trauma. Laying on of hands can get a person unstuck and back, though not always back to normal. It is a terrifying experience. Depending on the strength of the field and the time you've been stuck, you can also freeze. The shimmering form disappears, and there is no physical evidence that anything or anyone is there. If the position was not carefully marked, there is no returning from the freeze. When a person goes into a freeze, the area is roped off and everyone is kept clear, save some specialists with demagnetized equipment they use to unfreeze someone. In this state, there is a high sensitivity to localized magnetism. If a person with a pocket compass gets too close, the person in the freeze will spontaneously combust and will burn there for hours or even days. Those that have been brought back say that perception is immensely distorted and are acutely aware of the passage of time. Minutes feel like days. You cannot comprehend your environment. It becomes ghost-like and distorted, like you are between life and death, and both realms are mixed together about you. And you cannot move, talk, or do anything about it. A person can also be pushed into a deep freeze, where the sense of time is completely gone. It is impossible to tell if a minute or a century has passed. The few that have been brought back from a deep freeze say that there is another world out there, a world that defies description, and they are usually overcome by madness, a result of their inability to comprehend what happened. We now suspect they have transitioned into the cosmic sector where their physical and motor skills are useless, and everything would be seen by human consciousness as inside out. That's just some of the fun of messing around with coordinate time. We ran into a lot of problems trying to deal with the cosmic sector, Larson's name for coordinate time, as all interaction with it, no matter how precisely calculated, would have random consequences. As it turned out, Coordinate time is not this empty void that the 19th century ether researchers led people to believe. It is an entire universe unto itself with stars, planets, and life. Okay, I think we're going to stop it there. You can take all that for what it's worth. An eyewitness account or somebody writing science fiction. Science fiction informed by the reciprocal system. But it's rather interesting, and hope you got something out of that. And thanks for tuning in for today. And we will start up with this article again tomorrow. So come back and have a great day.